Hello everyone, welcome to April's Spotlight On. Today I'm here with Duncan Chu, who is the President of the Victorian Public Sector Enablers Network. This month we focus on Networkology Part 1, the art and science of running a high-performing network and ERG. And Duncan knows all about running a high-performing network, so really looking forward to our discussion today. Duncan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Lauren.
Thank you. Just for just to describe myself, I am a Black woman in my 20s with my hair back, wearing a black shirt in a living room setting.
My name is Duncan. I am a Caucasian male in my mid-40s, wearing glasses as well, dark hair brushed to the side, wearing a jacket, sitting on a couch in a living room setting.
Thank you. So Duncan, let's get straight into the interview. So what drives you to volunteer your time and energy to lead the network?
It's a great question, because I certainly in the last 2 years of the pandemic, I've actually asked myself that question a number of times. But when I've sort of been reflecting on the questions that you provided for me to talk about today, I've sort of have been reflecting on my own experience and my own story. I actually have how I acquired my disability in my 30s. I actually had a quite a rare form of cancer within the bone of my right leg. So I had quite extensive surgery, lots of rehab, and I actually wasn't working for close to 4 years, just due to all that process. I'm sure members of Purple Space who have experience with cancer will probably empathise with that as well. And so when I was re-entering the workforce, I maybe about half of employees who work in the Victorian Public Service conceal their disability, and that was me. It was a new organisation. It was my first time working in the public sector, and I was really unsure. And so, after trying to apply for work and getting, turned down a lot, of course, your resilience and your self-worth is reduced as well. So what was actually happening in those, particularly that first few years, I was basically working like a 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But what was happening is that it was actually detrimental to my own well-being. So every 2 months, what would happen is that I would need to take like a week off to recover, and then come back and do it again. And it was a cycle that wasn't really working, because what was happening is that I was getting home, eating dinner, rolling straight into bed, and then doing it all again next morning. So I didn't have any great balance in my life. But but then I changed a role. I had a manager I felt that I could sort of open up to, be more vulnerable, and start to sort of understand, talking about my health needs and my disability within a work context, and then ask for adjustments and accommodations in my job. So, skipping to a few years later, I work 4 days a week, taking Wednesdays off, a mix of in the office and working from home. So it's pretty much perfect in reality. But it took me quite a time to get there. And during that period, the Enablers Network had just been created. So it was around about 2016. So I had been with the department for a couple of years, and I heard peripherally about it, that had been created. I saw an article on our internet about it. I went, okay, cool. I submitted my email address to be on the newsletter, and didn't hear a great deal, afterwards. And so I'm basically taking like my experience, which was, really subpar, to where I am now, and like all the things that I've learned and all the things that I've benefited from, is what I'm now passing on and investing my time and my energy towards. So, prior to my cancer story, I actually was working in what we call vocational education, so tertiary education. So I've always been about lifelong learning and giving back and sharing information. So it sort of basically taps into those values as well.
Thank you. And can you tell us a bit about how you made the business case for creating your ERG network at the start?
Yeah. So at the very start, so back in 2016, it was literally 3 people, at a table in a cafe somewhere, we're just talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was an employee network like the Pride Network for LGBTIQ plus employees? And so it really started at that grassroots level. But sort of fast forwarding, to 2 years later, in 2018, the Victorian government had released a disability employment action plan, and the network had been consulted in it. So we were embedded in it, saying the departments will engage and work with the Enablers Network, which represents people with disability and advocates for their needs in actually reaching and attaining all the actions and all the outcomes that we're striving. And the main outcome of that is reaching a disability representation target of 12% by 2025. So in that same year, in 2018, of that report or the action plan coming out, we also went to the secretaries of our departments and actually put forward that business case, saying, well, at the time, we had about 170 members. We're still very small at that time, and we were sort of demonstrating, well, this is what we're asking for. And at the time, we were asking for an operating expenditure, just to help with events and promotion and the like, but also like a dedicated resource or like a person, an officer to help us operate the business as well. And what happened quite quickly after that, so that was around about August 2018, September. So 2 months after that, the first of the departmental networks has started created. So we have 10 agencies, so Department of Health, Department of Environment, etc. So the first 2 had just been created. So that started like a cascading effect across the public sector. And now, the result of that, investment means that we have over 1,000 members. We now have 14 chapters of our network. The latest was actually created actually just last month. So, and we're continuing to grow. So I think it was actually really just around to timing and just sort of seeing that opportunity, saying that this is what the Victorian government was looking for, for a public service that reflected the community that we serve, and actually putting a tangible target in there that for us to strive towards, and that taking that self-determination approach around that it has to include people with disability in that work, otherwise it won't be sustainable and it won't be anything meaningful as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to see the growth that's happened as a result of you really making the business case, and yeah, with how many members you have now as well. And you really highlight an important point in terms of I love the sort of self-determination approach, and that approach of sort of doing what you can to make the case, doing the homework, making sure it's kind of not too overly complex, and hopefully other people can see this interview for inspiration in terms of them looking at what other organisations are doing to really mine in with making the business case. So thank you for that. And we know that the last 2 years have been tough for employees with disabilities and their ERG networks. And we've heard a lot of amazing stories from our community who have thrived as a result of more flexible working and ERGs increasing their reach and impact via digital delivery. We know that your experience has been interesting during the pandemic of recruiting and engaging volunteers. So could you just talk us a bit through that, please?
Sure. So for the members who don't know, so I'm based in Melbourne in Australia, and we have the unfortunate record of being the most locked down city in the world. I think it's like 262 days over 5 lockdowns, and it was quite a feat and to survive that. And in fact, the Chief Health Officer's recommendations of if you can work from home, you should, actually has just been lifted in the last couple of weeks, and the transition back into an office has just happened like in the last 2 weeks. So so that 2 years, as you pointed out, has been quite difficult for the network. But like any any business and like any organisation in any industry, there's always a continual attrition and a continual recruitment that's required. And that's all, and we've maintained that through the pandemic, but particularly over the last 2 years. Some of the challenges have been around the discretionary time that volunteers can provide to the network has decreased, and also quite often in direct competition with our other employee networks in the public service. So we have 6 at the moment, and because we all support each other and we're all allies of each other, sometimes there'll be often competing demands. So like for example, in Victoria at the moment, there's some great work happening around gender equality, and it's highly intersectional, but it's consuming a lot of everyone's attention, and some of the other other issues like disability haven't given the same, I guess, attention as some of the other diversity employee groups. So we have this shifting capacity of volunteers being able to contribute to the network, and in addition to that, I would say that the workload for the network actually had materially increased as well, just to the inherent nature of what we do. So particularly advocating around policy change or changes in processes around, as you pointed out, working from home or flexible work, etc. So that included, being quite heavily involved in, new policy design, new support materials around, how you support teams while working remotely, how you induct new staff. There were some disability specific resources there as well. But for the existing members who had been there from the very beginning or near the start, it had actually burnt up a lot of the goodwill that we had generated from our inception pre-pandemic. So, and also a lot of Victorian public servants were reassigned to work on the COVID pandemic response. So they were no longer in their substantive roles. So, people were very stretched or asked to do more in that period. So it's been challenging, and not only for the volunteers, but then also for our executive sponsors. It was also harder to get some FaceTime or direct time with our champions to talk about the issues, because their workloads had increased as well, and under some very, very tight deadlines.
Thank you. It's really important to have leaders who can be kind of open and honest about the struggles as well, and how such a drastic events such as the pandemic over the last 2 years does impact really vital areas of the network. So thank you. Are there any sort of like positive impacts that you think will be retained post pandemic?
Certainly. So within our public service, so we've actually had a major policy change or policy reform for anyone who works within the public service. So previously we had a policy, and it was called All Roles Flex. And in short, what that meant is that flexibility was available upon request. And we changed the policy is that now flexibility is actually there now by default. And what that means, in practice, that that people have the ability to work from home 2 days a week, and then work from an office location 3 days a week. So that's the starting position. So if people had an adjustment and they would wanted to work 3 days from home, they could request that on basis upon equal opportunity and anti-discrimination laws, as an example. So I guess that sort of mechanism is there in place now. It's very strongly supported by our secretaries and senior leaders. And now that we're going back to the office, it's now interesting to see how it's going to play out. So some of the, it's going to be, I think some of the details is going to be quite interesting, for example. I think the next 6 months are going to be quite interesting. And I think that, understanding human behaviour and that, behaviour change is quite slow. So people are going to take the habits that they formed while working from home into the workplace. There will be an adjustment period, and there'll be some new habits, as an example. I was actually writing my newsletter over the weekend, and I was sort of reflecting on, that I guess it's, that theory around that, it takes 66 days for a new behaviour to become a routine. But in fact, the research shows that it's between 18 and 254 days. So it's going to take a lot longer to happen. And like last year, when we sort of did have a false start in return to the office, there was this huge concern about being this sort of, snap back to how we were working previously. But now it's been a solid 2 years from working from home. I think that snap back, it's not going to happen because, we're quite embedded, in how we're working, and there's going to be an adjustment. So, and with the support of our leadership of, having a combination of working from home and working from the office, as well as, making sure that a person's individual situations are, respectfully and, properly considered to ensure that, the things that we've learned and we've benefited from for the last 2 years remain in place. And like in one of the guidelines, for example, we say that an employee with a disability should not transition back to working in the office until their adjustments have been looked at and that they're back in place, because you don't want someone going back. Without them, it's similar to having a new employee and asking them to start the job without the adjustments in place as well. So it's kind of the same principle there too.
Thank you. It is like, despite how awful the last couple of years have been in a lot of ways, it is nice to hear about the hopefully long-term positives and changes to us as people in society that can kind of come out of that in terms of how we work. So thank you.
Like it's like our research, we do staff satisfaction surveys like most organisations, and like the findings over the last 2 years have shown that the rates of bullying, discrimination, and harassment and other unrespectful behaviours has significantly fallen while people are working from home. So people are happier, so our members are happier, they're more productive, they're more efficient. So we actually want to maintain that, ability. And for people who were denied, working from home previously who now have that, like they might have, had to work, like a 0.6 or a 0.8, so working 3 or 4 days a week. And then they've been able to work 5 days a week, been able to earn more money, which means they can have more, discretionary income as opposed to paying, medical bills for medications or doctor's appointments, whatever. So it has had an amazing effect. Another would be that it's, raised the profile of mental health. And a good thing, because now everyone's talking about it. Whereas when I was growing up, if you had a kid who was depressed or anxious, they were told, just basically, snap out of it, or it's just in your head kind of thing. But what that we're living in now is very, very different, and it's, much more inclusive as well.
Yeah, I think it has opened up conversations about a lot of really important aspects. One thing that's kind of stuck with me, for example, is conversations more focused on like rest in general, and also there's a lot of really fruitful conversations and kind of policies and progress that has come out of this pandemic. So thank you so much.
From a cultural perspective as well, just quickly, is that like within the network we do like a monthly social virtual drinks essentially. And like, pre-pandemic, a lot of people with disability wouldn't do that because if they had, chronic pain or whatever it is, they just want to get home and rest. But if they're, if they're at home, they can have a drink in a safe environment and they can converse with colleagues. So it actually has also increased the social connection between our members as well.
That's really lovely. Yeah. You also have a great relationship as well as with the network, with also your executive sponsor. We know that you took part in the Purple Eyes Up Leader to Leader campaign in 2021, and your video is brilliant. So it's lovely to see that you have a great relationship with your sponsor. What have you learned about maximising the benefits of your relationship?
I think that video would not have been wouldn't have been possible without having a strong relationship with our executive sponsors. Like if we had done it maybe 2 years ago, I don't think it wouldn't have gotten off the ground. But the fact that each department did one, and I did two. So one, because I'm based in the Department of Education, and but then because I also represent the whole Victorian Public Service, I did one with our commissioner as well. So I had each one were keen to do it, and that just shows that there's that great working relationship between the network and our executive sponsors. So there's one in each department as well as one overall, and but within that group, as great as they are and as supportive as they are, there's actually not a great deal, if any, of lived experience of disability. So generally, what I've learned is that you need to understand what their motivations are. So like the same question that you asked me at the very beginning, was my, why do I give my time and my energy to this? It's the same thing. Why have you volunteered to be the executive sponsor for the network? What's your motivation? And quite often it's either due to a family member or someone that they know quite closely. So I think the data is 1 in 3 households in Australia has someone with a disability, or during their the formative years as they're starting their career, there's been a significant moment that's kind of stayed with them, and so I guess understanding what their motivation is and then tapping into that, and so whether it is lived experience or whether it's their their child or their brother or whatever it might be, or if it's because they want to be an ally, that helps to sort of to be able to relate to each other at a more personal level as opposed to an officer level public servant to an executive. It sort of closes the gap. So we're sort of more like peers, learning off each other, because I'm learning from them and they are learning from me. So they're building their own disability confidence by connecting with us, and executives don't get a lot of time to do professional development, so that exposure and that hands-on work really helps them, and then vice versa. Yes, we have regular meetings and making sure that we sort of maintain regular contact, but and talking about the business of the network, what's coming up and what we've been doing. But then also at a personal level, like in the last year, there's been quite a few coaching moments where there's been some really difficult times or situations that I just needed, someone, in an executive or a leadership role where I could sort of, go to and sort of talk through what's going on, and sort of explain my thinking and where I'm at, and just to sort of, and also the debriefing as well, because it's, it has been a challenging 2 years. Yeah.
Thank you. I love the emphasis you place on it being a two-way relationship, and how they are gaining stuff from it as well, and really finding out more about their motivations. I think one thing as well that it can be easy to forget is that it is a two-way street. It is about making sure that there's expectations on both sides, and that you're working in a way that supports both of you to get the most out of the relationship too. So thank you. And sponsors, yeah, they make such a massive difference to supporting your objectives as a network or ERG. And when it comes to making things happen when operating outside of your normal sphere of influence, how do you do that? How do you make change as a leader?
It's hard. So it was actually one of the I think conversation points of the leader to leader videos that we did for December 3rd last year, is that my role, or any other member from the network's leadership team who leads the departmental chapter, we don't have a traditional positional power or authority. So it does require you to be quite creative in finding those other leverage points, but finding ways in which you can find, where you're embedded and sort of hold your ground, or find sort of precedences. That's a word, I said that rightly. So like a precedent. Precedents? I don't know. It's a weird word there. Anyway, so a precedent in other areas which you can leverage off. So like an example for that that comes to mind quite recently is looking at the standing committees or the executive committees of the public service, and within their terms of reference, that there's a point there that said they will respectfully consult with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees on issues that would directly impact them. So going back to that self-determination principle we talked about earlier, and I was thinking, well, people with disability have that right as well for self-determination. Why can't we use that too? So going to the executive and saying, and formally requesting, can we have, also, can we have an employee representative on this committee or council, to represent the voice of with people with disability in the department and the VPS. So there's, yes, in an element, we ourselves are, leading the way, but there are also people ahead of us who've done the same thing, and learning from them as well. So as I mentioned, there's 5 different employee networks and in our public service, and we meet regularly, and we're always sort of sharing and learning off each other. And we're just more the richer for it, because the things that will benefit employees with disability will also benefit the LGBTIQ plus community, or our First Australians, or people who come from a cultural and linguistic background, etc., and so on. So we're in it together. So as a result, instead of being 5 separate networks, we're actually just we're one, and that strength really does come together. So yeah, to find those those interesting influence roles and working out how can we take advantage of that, and because we as at an officer level public servant, we often have a direct line with our champions, and normally like between me and the secretary, I think there's 7 layers of bureaucracy. I can pick up the phone or email directly to my executive champion without fear of recourse kind of thing. So it allows me to be allows my voice not to be diluted after trying, or that idea of Chinese whispers as well, making sure that what is being heard is actually what intended as well. And also a bit of timing as well, right opportunities, find the right people, and just and bringing them all together.
Thank you. Yeah, when we met before, I really loved your emphasis on the using sort of the influenced focused nature of the role and how you can really use that to your advantage. And I think you said something before about it's about finding the right opportunities, finding the right people and reaching out, which I really liked and think is really powerful. So yeah. And do you have any tips for disability networks or ERGs who are seeking to create the right structure and governance? I know that you have a pretty strong structure within your network.
So at times, even like today, it feels like the network is being pushed along faster than at times that we feel like we're ready for. So I guess for any new, and particularly when there's like executive buy-in as well, they want to support you, and that support can feel I say premature, but can feel maybe not ready for it yet. But I guess it's about trusting them as well. But starting small and just keeping your processes simple and have those processes in place. So having that that membership register, keeping track of how many hours that you're given to the network, and like a good stakeholder or client management system. So basically you can sort of keep track of the work that you're doing, so then it helps to sort of build that business case to present if you're not there yet. So you need to to start that evidence base pretty early. And when it comes to meetings and and the like, you don't want to be tied down by meeting administration initially. You just want to sort of get the idea, get the word out, and start building momentum, and then you can sort of strengthen the governance and your arrangements and your processes as the network grows. So as you pointed out, we do have some quite strong governance. Like we've been going for 6 years now, 7, and we went through a major governance review last year, and it went to a full member vote at our AGM and passed. But like before, we're talking about finding the right opportunities and the right people. Like for me, coming into the president role and having a master's in governance, and governance is something I'm passionate about, so I drove that, and it took pretty much 2 years, from the initial discussion to getting it done. So just slowly chipping away at it. Some things do move slowly, but I saw that our governance didn't reflect how we were operating, and it had we saw a risk there, and then that risk actually became an incident, and so it became a point where we had to change it. Otherwise, that risk would continue to be there. So we need we needed to close that off quite quickly. So by keeping it small and simple, it would help you to be more proactive than reactive. So talking about the challenges of the last 2 years, and trying to get volunteers time. So traditionally we would have people leading portfolios within the network. So there would be one around, advocacy and policy change, one around social events and inclusion, one around, capability and education. But as people's capacity has reduced, we're now going to break that up for the next year or so and take a more project approach that's more chunked. So it's like smaller, digestible pieces, so we actually can respond to the people who are dedicating the time on the network, but can still tap into their passion and tap into that motivation that they want to give to the network.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, I really like the sort of way you've got a structure where as people can just kind of get involved in what's something they're passionate about, and I like how you kind of followed that example by doing the same with governance as an area that you were really passionate about. And I think that's a great way to make sure that people do stay motivated and involved in the network, but making sure that you still kind of cover your bases with your structure and governance too. Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we have come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed by us. We've really enjoyed working with you over the last couple of years, with the Leader to Leader campaign, but also when you took part in our 24-hour global broadcast in 2020. And so we know that our members hopefully will learn a lot about networkology around sort of making the business case and structuring governance and volunteers. And working with their sponsors and champions, but also having realistic objectives in place as well. So it's been great. Speaking to you today, and to our viewers or listeners, next month for May, where we look at working with other networks and ERGs. Duncan's already given some great tips here, but we'll be speaking to Doug Dolan from Shell about the work that he's doing. So thank you for taking the time to listen or watch, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.